What happens when one of Britain's most beloved entertainers walks onto a morning talk show expecting a friendly chat and instead gets ambushed by a host with an agenda? In just 45 seconds, a seemingly innocent question turns into the most shocking on-air meltdown in daytime television history, ending with a guest storming off set and a host left speechless in front of millions of viewers. Graham Norton arrived at the studio that morning with his trademark smile, ready to promote his latest book and share some light-hearted stories with the audience. He had been a guest on the show countless times before, always bringing warmth and humor to the sofa. The crew greeted him like an old friend. Makeup artists chatted with him about his recent trip to Italy, and everything seemed perfectly normal. But behind the scenes, something had shifted. Lorraine had apparently decided this interview would be different. As the show's theme music played and the cameras went live, Lorraine sat on the main sofa, flanked by her regular panelists. To her left was Michelle, the show's lifestyle correspondent who always brought celebrity gossip and fashion tips. To her right sat David, the resident relationship expert who offered advice to viewers on everything from dating to divorce. Both of them had worked with Lorraine for years and knew her moods well. That morning, they exchanged nervous glances as Lorraine shuffled through her notes with an unusual intensity. "Welcome back," Lorraine said to the camera with her signature grin. "Now, our next guest needs absolutely no introduction. He's charmed audiences for decades with his quick wit and infectious personality. Please welcome the wonderful Graham Norton." The audience applauded enthusiastically as Graham walked onto the set, waving and blowing kisses. He settled into the guest chair across from Lorraine, crossing his legs and adjusting his jacket. "Lovely to be here," Graham said warmly. "Always a pleasure." "Oh, we're thrilled to have you," Lorraine replied, though her smile seemed a bit tighter than usual. "You're here to talk about your new book, which I have to say, I found quite interesting." Graham's eyes lit up. "Thank you. I poured my heart into it. It's a collection of essays about life, love, and everything in between. Very personal stuff, actually." Michelle leaned forward, genuinely interested. "I love the chapter about your childhood in Ireland. So moving." "That's kind of you," Graham said. "Those memories are very precious to me." Lorraine cut in, her tone shifting slightly. "Yes, well, speaking of precious memories, I wanted to ask you about something. You've been quite vocal lately about certain issues, haven't you?" Graham's smile faltered just a bit. "I'm not sure what you mean." "Oh, come on," Lorraine said with a dismissive wave. "You know exactly what I mean. Your comments about television standards, your opinions on how shows should be run. Some people might say you've gotten a bit too big for your boots." The studio fell silent. Michelle and David exchanged uncomfortable looks. Graham sat up straighter, his expression hardening. "I beg your pardon?" Graham said carefully. "Well," Lorraine continued, flipping through her cards as if she were discussing the weather, "you've been in this business a long time. Perhaps you think that gives you the right to criticize how others do their jobs." Graham's face flushed. "Lorraine, I've always been respectful of my colleagues. If you're referring to my interview last month, where I discussed the importance of authentic representation in media, that was a thoughtful conversation about industry standards, not a personal attack on anyone." "Oh, was it?" Lorraine leaned back, a smirk playing on her lips. "Because it sounded rather preachy to me. Rather holier than thou, if I'm being honest." David shifted uncomfortably in his seat, clearly wanting to intervene, but unsure how. Michelle stared down at her hands, her cheeks reddening. "I don't appreciate your tone," Graham said, his voice steady but firm. "I came here to talk about my book, not to be attacked for having opinions." Lorraine laughed. A sharp sound that didn't reach her eyes. "Attacked? Oh, darling, if you think this is an attack, you're even more sensitive than I thought. I'm simply asking you to explain why you feel entitled to lecture the rest of us about how to do our jobs when your own show has had its share of controversies." "What controversies?" Graham demanded. "My show celebrates people from all walks of life. We create a space where guests feel comfortable being themselves. Do they? Lorraine shot back. Or do they feel pressured to perform for your amusement? I've heard stories, you know. Guests who felt manipulated, who felt like they were just there to be the butt of jokes. Graham's jaw tightened. That's absolutely untrue, and you know it. Every single person who sits on my sofa is treated with respect and dignity. Michelle finally found her voice, speaking softly. Graham, your show has always been wonderful. I think maybe we should... Oh, Michelle, please, Lorraine interrupted, not even looking at her colleague. Let's not pretend we're all living in some fantasy world where everyone loves everyone. This is reality. And the reality is that Graham here has built a career on gossip and scandal, and now he wants to act like he's above it all. The audience gasped. Some people started murmuring to each other, clearly shocked by Lorraine's aggression. That's not what I do, Graham said, his voice rising slightly. My show is about celebration, about bringing joy to people. Yes, we have fun, but it's never at anyone's expense. Every guest who sits on my sofa knows they're in a safe space. Safe space? Lorraine scoffed. Is that what we're calling it now? A safe space where you ply people with alcohol and get them to reveal their deepest secrets? I don't ply anyone with anything, Graham said firmly. Offering someone a glass of wine during a conversation is hardly manipulation. It's hospitality. Something you clearly know nothing about. Oh, here we go, Lorraine said, throwing her hands up. Now, I'm the bad guy because I'm not buying into your perfect image. The nation's sweetheart, everyone's favorite uncle. It must be exhausting keeping up that facade. It's not a facade, Graham insisted, his patience clearly wearing thin. This is who I am. I enjoy making people comfortable. I like bringing out the best in them. If you find that suspicious, that says far more about you than it does about me. Really? Lorraine's eyes gleamed with something almost cruel. So, when you had that actress on last year and spent 20 minutes talking about her divorce, that wasn't at her expense? When you made jokes about that politician's wardrobe malfunction, that was respectful? When you got that singer so drunk they could barely stand, that was bringing out the best in them? Those were conversations, Graham explained, clearly trying to maintain his composure despite his rising anger. Conversations that my guests engaged in willingly. They laughed along. They were comfortable. And for your information, that singer was not drunk. They were tired from a long day of promotion, and we gave them a comfortable place to relax and be themselves. Were they? Lorraine pressed. Or did they just smile and nod because they knew it was good publicity? Because let's be honest, Graham, your show is a machine. A well-oiled machine that chews people up and spits them out, and you've convinced yourself it's all harmless fun. David cleared his throat loudly. I think perhaps we're getting a bit off track here. Graham's book is really about... I know what the book is about, Lorraine snapped at David, causing him to recoil slightly. I read it, unlike some people who just skim talking points. And what struck me, what really jumped out at me, was the hypocrisy. Page after page of Graham waxing poetic about authenticity and kindness, about treating people with dignity and respect, when his entire career is built on getting celebrities drunk and having them spill secrets for ratings. It's manipulation disguised as charm. That is a complete mischaracterization, Graham interjected, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. I have never manipulated anyone. Not once in 30 years. Oh, please, Lorraine waved her hand dismissively. You're telling me that all those revealing moments, all those tears, all those confessions, they just happened spontaneously? You expect us to believe you have nothing to do with creating those moments? I create an atmosphere where people feel safe enough to be vulnerable if they choose, Graham said through gritted teeth. There's a world of difference between that and manipulation. One is based on trust, the other on deception. I deal in trust. Do you? Lorraine challenged. Or do you just tell yourself that, so you can sleep at night? That is enough, Graham said, his voice like steel. I don't know what's gotten into you today, Lorraine, But this is completely unprofessional. I've never gotten anyone drunk. I serve wine on my show, yes, because it creates a relaxed atmosphere. But suggesting I manipulate people is not just wrong, it's defamatory. Oh, defamatory, Lorraine mimicked his tone mockingly. Listen to you with your big words. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You think you're so much better than everyone else. I have never said that, Graham replied. I have never implied that. What I have said is that media should be responsible, that we have a duty to treat people with humanity. If you find that preachy, then perhaps you should examine why basic decency bothers you so much. The tension in the studio was palpable. Crew members stood frozen, and unsure whether to cut to commercial or let the confrontation play out. Michelle looked like she wanted to disappear into the sofa cushions. David was gripping his notes so tightly his knuckles had turned white. Lorraine stood up suddenly, towering over Graham, who remained seated. You want to talk about basic decency? Fine. Let's talk about how you've made a fortune off other people's personal lives, how you've turned vulnerability into entertainment. And now you sit there in your expensive suit, in your successful life, and you dare to judge the rest of us? Graham stood as well, meeting her gaze. I'm not judging anyone, but I will not sit here and be insulted. I came here as a courtesy, as a friend, and you've turned this into some kind of vendetta. Why? What have I ever done to you? You want to know what you've done? Lorraine's voice was shaking now, whether from anger or something else. You've spent years building this image of yourself as the nice guy, the safe pair of hands, while the rest of us get criticized for every little mistake. You get away with everything because people like you. Well, I'm not afraid to say what everyone's thinking. And what is everyone thinking? Graham challenged. That you're fake, Lorraine said coldly. That your whole persona is an act. That behind that charming smile is someone just as calculating and ruthless as anyone else in this business. The studio was completely silent now. Even the audience seemed to be holding their breath. Graham stared at Lorraine for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but clear. Ina, I feel sorry for you. I really do. Because if you think kindness is fake, if you think treating people well is an act, then you've lost something fundamental. Something important. Don't you dare patronize me, Lorraine hissed. I'm not, Graham said simply. I'm telling you the truth. And the truth is, I don't know what happened to make you this bitter, but I won't participate in it anymore. He turned to Michelle and David. I'm sorry you had to witness this. You're both lovely people who deserve better than to be caught in the middle of whatever this is. Michelle's eyes were glistening with tears. Graham, I'm so sorry. I don't know what... It's not your fault, Graham assured her gently. None of this is your fault. He looked back at Lorraine. I've been in this industry for over 30 years. I've interviewed thousands of people. I've seen the best and worst of humanity. But I have never, in all that time, been treated with such disrespect by a fellow professional. You should be ashamed of yourself. I should be ashamed? Lorraine's voice rose to a near shout. You're the one who... No, Graham interrupted firmly. I'm done. I'm not doing this. You can say whatever you want about me after I leave, and I'm sure you will, but I won't give you the satisfaction of watching me lose my temper. He unclipped his microphone with steady hands, placing it carefully on the chair. The sound technician looked panicked, but didn't move to stop him. Lorraine seemed momentarily stunned by his composure. You can't just walk off my show. Watch me, Graham said. He turned to the audience. I apologize to all of you. You came here expecting entertainment, not this circus. I hope the rest of your day is better than mine has been. Several audience members started clapping, then more joined in. Within seconds, a significant portion of the audience was applauding Graham, some even standing. Lorraine's face went red. Sit down. This is my show. You don't get to just... But Graham was already walking toward the exit, his head held high. David suddenly stood up, his voice stronger than anyone had heard it all morning. Lorraine, stop, David said. "Just stop. This has gone too far." "Excuse me?" Lorraine whirled on him. "You work for me, David. You don't get to tell me what to do on my own show." "Someone needs to," David replied, his hands shaking, but his voice steady. "This isn't right. Graham has been nothing but professional, and you've been absolutely horrible to him. I don't know what's going on with you, but this isn't the person I thought I worked for." Michelle nodded, finding her courage. "He's right, Lorraine. That was cruel. Graham didn't deserve any of that." "Oh, so now you're both against me?" Lorraine looked between them, her expression a mixture of anger and something that might have been hurt. "After everything I've done for your careers, I gave you both opportunities when no one else would. I made you who you are." "That doesn't give you the right to treat people this way," David said, his voice growing stronger. "Success doesn't excuse cruelty, Lorraine. It never has, and it never will." "Cruelty?" Lorraine repeated, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You think asking tough questions is cruel? This is journalism, David. Not everyone gets to be coddled." "There's a difference between tough questions and personal attacks," Michelle interjected. "You didn't ask Graham about his work. You attacked his character. You made accusations without evidence. You tried to humiliate him on live television." "I tried to get the truth," Lorraine countered, "something neither of you seem interested in anymore." "The truth?" David shook his head. "The truth is that Graham Norton has been nothing but gracious to this industry for decades. The truth is that he treats his guests with respect and kindness. The truth is that you went after him for reasons that had nothing to do with journalism." "We're not against you," Michelle said quietly, her voice shaking. "But we can't support what just happened. That wasn't journalism. That wasn't even a conversation. That was an ambush, plain and simple." Graham had reached the edge of the set, but paused when he heard Michelle and David speaking up. He didn't turn around, but his shoulders seemed to relax slightly, as if their words had given him some small comfort. Lorraine looked at the cameras, suddenly seeming to remember they were still broadcasting. "We're going to take a break," she said through clenched teeth. "Actually," the floor manager's voice came from behind the cameras, "we're staying live. Producer's orders." Lorraine's eyes widened. She was trapped, live on air, with her own colleagues contradicting her, and her guest having just walked off in protest. Graham finally turned around one last time. "You know what the saddest part is? I actually admired you once. I thought you were one of the good ones. Someone who genuinely cared about making people feel welcome. But this isn't about me at all, is it? This is about whatever you're going through, whatever's making you lash out." "Don't you dare psychoanalyze me," Lorraine said, but her voice had lost its edge. She sounded tired now. "I'm not," Graham said softly. "I'm just sad. Sad that it's come to this. Sad that you felt this was necessary. I hope you figure out whatever it is you're dealing with. I really do." And with that, he walked off the set, disappearing through the studio doors. The sound of them closing echoed through the space. The audience sat in stunned silence. Some were still clapping sporadically. Others just stared at Lorraine, waiting to see what would happen next. Lorraine stood there, while looking at the empty chair where Graham had been sitting. Michelle had tears running down her face now. David looked shell-shocked, his earlier bravery seeming to have drained out of him as the reality of what had just happened set in. "Well," Lorraine finally said, her voice hollow, "I suppose we should—" "Cut to commercial," the floor manager said. No longer a suggestion, but a command. "Now." As the cameras finally switched off, Lorraine sank back onto the sofa. The audience began to murmur loudly, some people standing up to leave, others pulling out their phones, no doubt already posting about what they had just witnessed. Michelle stood up shakily. "I need some air," she said to no one in particular, hurrying off the set. David remained seated, staring at Lorraine. "What were you thinking?" he asked quietly. Lorraine didn't answer. She just sat there, looking at her notes, at the prepared questions she had never asked, at the friendly conversation she had decided to destroy. In the green room, Graham was gathering his things. A production assistant hovered nervously nearby. "Mr. Norton, I'm so sorry about what happened. Is there anything we can get you? Water? Coffee?" "No, thank you," Graham said politely. "I just want to leave." "Of course, again, I'm so sorry. That wasn't... We had no idea she was going to..." "It's all right," Graham said, cutting off the young woman's anxious rambling. "None of this is your fault. You've all been lovely." He picked up his bag and his coat. His hands were steady, his expression calm, but there was a sadness in his eyes that hadn't been there when he arrived that morning. Back on set, and the commercial break was ending. Lorraine had reapplied her lipstick and straightened her posture, but something in her face had changed. The aggressive confidence was gone, replaced by something harder to read. "Welcome back," she said as the cameras went live again. Her voice was controlled, professional. "As you saw, our interview with Graham Norton ended prematurely. We're going to move on to our next segment now." But the audience wasn't having it. Several people started booing. Others shouted questions. "Why did you treat him like that?" one woman called out. "That was horrible," another voice added. Lorraine tried to continue. "Now, we have a wonderful cooking segment coming up." "Apologize," someone yelled from the audience. More voices joined in. "Apologize to Graham. That was disgraceful. You should be ashamed." David and Michelle were back on the sofa now, both looking uncomfortable. The cameras captured everything. The angry audience, the flustered host, the panelists who clearly wanted to be anywhere else. "Ladies and gentlemen, please," Lorraine said, her composure cracking. "I understand you're upset, but nothing." A man in the front row stood up. "I've been watching this show for years, and I've never seen anything so unprofessional. Graham Norton is a treasure, and you treated him like garbage." The audience erupted in agreement. Many people standing now, some pointing at Lorraine accusingly. The energy in the studio had completely shifted. What had started as shocked silence had turned into active hostility toward the host. "Sit down." "All of you!" Lorraine shouted, her composure completely shattered now. "This is my show. You're here as my guests." "We're here as audience members," a woman in the third row called out, "and we have every right to express our opinions about what we just witnessed. That was absolutely disgraceful." "Hear, hear," several other voices chimed in. "I think," David said, slowly, carefully, speaking loud enough to be heard over the commotion, "that perhaps we owe our viewers an explanation. That interview went in a direction that was unexpected and, quite frankly, uncomfortable for everyone involved." "David," Lorraine warned, her voice low and dangerous. "No, Lorraine," David said more firmly, straightening in his seat. "They deserve better than to just move on like nothing happened. We all saw it. Everyone watching at home saw it. Millions of people just witnessed what happened here. Pretending everything's fine doesn't make it true. It doesn't erase what you said or how you treated a respected colleague." Lorraine stood up abruptly. "I think we need another commercial break." "We just had one," the floor manager called out. Lorraine looked around wildly, as if searching for an escape. The audience was still murmuring angrily. Her own colleagues were barely looking at her. The cameras were capturing every second of her discomfort, broadcasting it to millions of homes across the country. "Fine," she said finally, her voice tight. "You want an explanation? Graham Norton came on this show with an attitude. He's been criticizing the industry, acting superior, and I simply called him out on it." The audience booed louder. Michelle actually gasped. David shook his head slowly. "That's not what happened," Michelle said quietly, but her words were picked up by her microphone. "That's not what any of us saw." "Michelle!" Lorraine snapped. "No," Michelle said, looking up with red-rimmed eyes. "I can't do this. I can't sit here and let you rewrite what just happened." Graham was polite and professional. You attacked him. You ambushed him with accusations that weren't fair or true. And when he stood up for himself with grace and dignity, you just got worse. The audience applauded Michelle's words. Someone whistled in support. Lorraine's face was scarlet now. "You're both fired," she said coldly. The gasps from the audience were audible even over the applause that had been building. David and Michelle looked at each other, then back at Lorraine. "You can't fire us on live television," David said, almost laughing in disbelief. "That's not how this works." "This is my show," Lorraine insisted. "I can do whatever I want." "Actually," the floor manager's voice came again, "you can't. And the producers are asking you to step off set. Now." Lorraine froze. "What?" "They said now, Lorraine," the floor manager repeated. "We're cutting to a pre-recorded segment, and you need to leave the set." For the first time all morning, Lorraine looked genuinely shaken. "You can't be serious." "I'm very serious," the floor manager said. "Please step off set." The audience watched in stunned fascination as Lorraine stood there, clearly trying to decide what to do. Finally, she ripped off her microphone and stormed off in the opposite direction Graham had gone, sent her heels clicking sharply against the floor. The moment she was gone, the studio seemed to exhale collectively. Michelle started crying properly now, and David put a comforting arm around her shoulders. "Well," David said to the camera with a weak smile, "this has certainly been the most dramatic morning any of us have ever had. I think we could all use a cup of tea." The audience laughed, the tension finally breaking. Someone started a slow clap that built into genuine applause for David and Michelle, who both looked overwhelmed and grateful. As the show cut to its pre-recorded cooking segment, the studio descended into chaos. Producers rushed onto the set. Audience members crowded together, discussing what they'd witnessed. Someone mentioned that clips were already trending online. In a quiet corner of the building, Graham Norton sat in his car, engine running. He stared at the steering wheel, processing everything. His phone buzzed constantly with calls and messages, but he ignored them all. A knock on his window made him look up. It was Michelle, her face streaked with mascara, David standing behind her. Graham rolled down the window. "Are you all right?" he asked. "Are we all right?" Michelle laughed. "Graham, we're so sorry. That was inexcusable." "You stood up for me," Graham said gently. "Both of you. That took courage." "It was the least we could do," David said. Graham nodded. "Thank you. It means more than you know." "What are you going to do?" Michelle asked. Graham smiled. "I'm going to go home, pour myself a very large glass of wine, and remind myself that most people in this business are kind. Unlike you two." "She fired us," David said, "on live television." "That won't stick," Graham assured them. "Trust me." He was right. But in that moment, what mattered was that three professionals who believed in treating people with respect had found themselves on the same side. "Take care of yourselves," Graham said. "And remember, being kind isn't weakness. It's strength." As he drove away, Michelle and David stood watching. Graham Norton, the man who had walked onto a set expecting a friendly chat and walked off with his dignity intact, was already thinking about tomorrow.